Daddy was the most ambitious Malazzo since Flavia Malazzo made the family fortune. He was a butcher and a rancher, and he opened Blue Girls, Flavia, Nebraska's first supermarket, on my 10th birthday. Early that morning, hours before the opening day ceremonies, I woke up under the frilly white canopy over my bed and saw Daddy grinning. He pointed to a ruffled, lacy blue organdy dress and blue patent leather slippers that lay at the end of my bed. And he placed a crown of artificial columbines on my head. Happy birthday, Princess. I felt as magically beautiful as Flavia Malazzo in the painting at City Hall. I didn't mind the stiff fabric scratching my skin. I was so excited I could scarcely wait to get dressed and go into town. But my mother came into my room wearing a narrow lavender linen shift. Her crazy black curls were pulled into a thick ponytail that stretched her white face across thin, flat cheekbones and slanted her eyes. "Are you helping her get dressed, Blackie?" Mommy! I look just like Flavia Malazzo!" "Are you, Blackie?" "It's her birthday." "Mommy! Daddy says I look just like a princess." "Don't you think she's old enough to dress herself?" "Jealous of your own daughter? Or me?" "She's old enough to dress herself, Blackie." And then Mommy smelled Daddy's fingers. And Daddy shook his head. But Mommy got hysterical anyway. She always got hysterical if Daddy and I were alone. It took her an hour to calm down before we could leave the house. She came from Sicily to Nebraska with nothing but a trunk, a baby son, and just enough money to buy a prize boar. 5 years later, she was the richest pork rancher in southeastern Nebraska. All her neighbors called her Widow Milazzo, even though she told them she'd never been married. If my father hadn't gotten married, if he had been more like Flavia Milazzo, he'd still be alive. I vowed to remain unmarried for the rest of my life. All I needed was a son. My own son.
Yes, ik ga snel af. Slechts nu dat je de weer simpliers is nefs vet snel niet af naar afsnit. Ja, dat is niet gaan. Zit in de na. Ik heb het heel iets met los voor de 6 was oorlog en heel voor de 6 afsteek maar vlug kan ik ook ja het is mooi niet vrouw afsteek als je beweegt
Well, I mean, this whole thing there, maybe very nice years that got with their own normal film there. No, you're right, you'll be listening to what you all I was see it because I could say it's saying it. No, actually, so it's you're also from the house and sure of town, sure for you, and what's the last job, I'm sure of the best, you know, can you stand to move serve for actually?
Ja, met macht is nog wat veel of everything of the of the one. So okay, so we know what the right have needs actually.
Is there anyone who spoke ill word of Judith? When therefore she had heard that Ozias had promised that he would deliver up the city after the 5th day, she sent to the ancients, Jabiri and Charmi. And they came to her, and she said to them, "What is this word which Ozias has consented to give up the city to the Assyrians, if within 5 days there come no one to aid us?" One day, we looked out the window and saw Daddy. He was so perfect. Tall and broad-shouldered. Daddy was chasing a young boar, and the boar was chasing a sow. The boar bit the sow in half, and Daddy covered the boar's head with his shirt and suffocated it, strangled it. The boar screamed and shit and fell down. All of a sudden, my mother lost control. Her crazy black hair flying around her white face. Her crazy white hands dove into the water, and she pulled me out and ran outside with me screaming, "Blackie! Blackie! How could you do that?" It was just pigs. People shouldn't get hysterical about pigs.
This is actually and the rock off, it's in the snaps, the swap, the arts, the service, and it's and it's desert now, down the neck. Actually, the pot now, and here.
Of the story and the box, that's all the other thing. But it's not sure this egg of now, it's so now. It's the soil, it's the snaps, it's honestly. All the boats. I don't know. It's in the test, isn't it? It's now, isn't it? Now, I'm just going to have to be deserves them. There's some of the fitting similar. There's similar. It's with that. It's actually it's never neat. It's a thing as of them. It's with the nerve. Snaps is a nerve. Nerve. Here, as you said, oh, if will leave for her, lava, sniff no. Yellow, surface, haar zuist, en hier snest is nog de vinger niet met de zout. Af zitten zich even. Ja, daar is niet zitten, dit is zelfs niet zijn macht, maar nee, al dus loops, is net schuif zich en de slaap is niet. Rust van de de wat niet zeer stil. Sneeuw is het, slurp naar macht, dus is het. Vast, wenn ich aan alles van zo. Schärme von den noch heck, Fahne, mir helfen nicht wieder nicht heck. Also man hat so was sehen. Auch nicht so, aber auch nach schönen Ayus, aber nicht. Hier ist gar nicht nach nicht noch so ruhig nicht so aus. Also nur mit Governor See, others on surface. This is grandpa. Service sitting that. Look, this grand, if the rest is it, so the sniff, you boost, as near talking at. Now, as more fish near nearer, so the crack or the crack with the sniff, so there's happening that. As near near be able on that here, this here of the other thing. They was so up in these lab. There was in the world, there's a seashore. How do you? The shop of the life fish hand, hopefully, after there was a wee discovery.
Yes, I know. Originally, I'll probably search the only people with the salt, probably very, very fair. It's a servant, nothing, or with a bear, nothing, nothing, all of that.
Det har min atlet har skrivit med en elifet. Jag har ju förstått av det för att se vad mer avsnitt that's no good. Here, okay, I feel like the nail with the subset as you.
The opening day ceremonies began at noon with a parade down the main and only paved street in town, all the way to the new store, which stood on the most official block in Sylvia, Nebraska, between City Hall and the house that my great-great-grandmother had built. Daddy and I waved to the crowd from the back seat of a red Mustang convertible. I got to cut the shiny blue 8-inch ribbon that was tied to the steel and glass doors of the most modern structure that ever had been built in Sylvia, Nebraska. The crowd sang me happy birthday. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, dear Indigo. Happy birthday to me. I was quite pleased with the progress of my 10th birthday party as I handed out pieces of the 5 by 5 foot sheet cake that had been shipped all the way from a bakery in Lincoln. Lincoln is the capital of Nebraska. Daddy stood under a tree smoking cigars with the mayor. My mother sat near me on the lawn in front of the store. You're cutting those pieces too big, Miss Priss. It's her birthday, Violet. She's too young for this, Blackie. Aw, did you want to cut the ribbon, Violet? You're going to be sorry you spoiled this child, Blackie. She's a beautiful girl, Violet. Men will always spoil Indigo. Yes, Blackie. She is beautiful. But she's strange. Men don't like strangeness in women. What did she mean, calling me strange? I had the feeling that she was about to get hysterical again. I told my parents I had to go to the bathroom, but I didn't go into the store to go to the bathroom. I sneaked next door into Flavia Malazzo's house. It was the first time I'd been in there by myself. This old house, as frail and thin-skinned as the old matriarch herself must have been when she died at 109. I forgot that my mother had had the floors revarnished. How could she make the floors shiny? Those bald Persian rugs with the ragged fringe weren't shiny. It smelled so bad in the house I thought I might throw up. The varnish fumes mixed with the smell of roasting meat. And who are you that tempt the Lord? This is not a word that may draw down mercy, but rather stir up wrath and enkindle indignation. I heard men yelling at each other about spitting the pig. Spitting the pig? I'd never seen a pig spit before. I ran outside. I forgot to go to the bathroom. Smoke rose from a pit which had been dug in the middle of the store's graveled parking lot. Several men stood around the pit, positioning a pale, stiff pig with a heavy stick running from its mouth in front through its asshole. My mother was such a weakling. She was so squeamish that she never touched raw flesh without wearing rubber gloves. And she wouldn't even let me see it. This was the first time I'd ever seen raw meat. I thought it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen. I wanted to see more. Daddy! Daddy! I saw the pig! That was the day I decided to become a butcher. I wasn't afraid of meat. I was a mulatto. Mulatto. All the oldest children in my great-great-grandmother's family were butchers. I was an only child. Daddy never let me butcher. Daddy never let me butcher anything larger than a goose until my 15th birthday. On my 15th birthday, Daddy let me dress a young boar. Butchering the pig created a weird mixture of feelings in me. The thrill of carving an animal as large as I was. The horror of feeling its warmth and fleshiness, and the uneasiness of dissecting what seemed too familiar to kill. That night, I woke up from dreaming that I was a pig, and that somebody tried to slice open my abdomen. I had a searing pain in my crotch, and I felt something warm and wet on the inside of my thighs. Blood! Ah! My parents ran into my room, their gaping eyes and mouth mirroring my own terror. I told them about my dream. No more knives! Don't get hysterical, Violet. We just won't be cutting any more pigs, that's all. Daddy! I don't want to butcher anything small. I don't want to butcher chickens. No cattle, young lady. If you won't give me anything bigger than a suckling, then I just can't be a butcher. You have set a time for the mercy of the Lord, and you have appointed him a day according to your pleasure. But for as much as the Lord is patient, let us be permanent for this same thing. And with many tears, let us beg his pardon. For God will not threaten like man, nor be inflamed to anger like the sons of man. It's just as well that I decided not to be a butcher anymore. As soon as I started menstruating, boys followed me around. Daddy said, "You're the most beautiful girl in town. You look just like Flavia Milazzo." I don't want her to be the most beautiful girl in town, Blackie. I want her to get married. You sure are in a hurry to get rid of her. You want to keep her here forever, don't you? Jealous of your own daughter? My mother got her wish. Virgie Griggs, the handsome high school football hero, gave me a sapphire engagement ring on my 17th birthday. Virgie was taller and broader shouldered than anyone who'd been born in Flavia, Nebraska for several generations, except Daddy. I deserved him. My parents took a short vacation trip to Florida. Part of Violet's plan to put Blackie into a better mood for my wedding. My mother's idea, of course. Their plane crashed in a thunderstorm over Kansas on the way back. At the age of 18 and a half, I was an orphan because my father gave in to my mother. Did you hear me? Because my father gave in to Violet. I was alone. All I had left was my great-great-grandmother's house and the painting of her at City Hall. Virgie was useless. Not only was he dumb, like Daddy said, in 2 years of giving in and letting him maul me like an animal, I hadn't gotten pregnant. I had to find somebody else. Russell was a wealthy businessman who'd started out at the butcher shop as one of my father's protégés when he was 14. It was 2 months after my parents died. He came up to me and pulled me away from the other women. He asked me to sell him my great-great-grandmother's house. Can you imagine? He wanted me to sell him a piece of the most official block in town. And for what? Progress. It's not worth the upkeep anyway. That house was the only thing I had that meant anything to me. Right after my parents died, I had the floor stripped. stripped. And I had people all over Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, the Dakotas looking for Flavia's furniture and antique shops. My parents' house was just a big old modern thing my mother probably found in a catalog. I wasn't going to live there. Russell, he was about 15 years older than I was. He liked to tell me that he wished my father was his own father. Too bad he wasn't. Russell was tall and broad-shouldered and almost as handsome as Daddy, except for his eyes. His eyes were too small, dark, hard. But I didn't care about his eyes. I could get just as good a baby from him as I could get from anybody. So I let Russell think I might sell him my great-great-grandmother's house. He started talking to me every Sunday after church. Every Sunday. Every Sunday he told me he'd never been married before because his mother told him never to marry a woman who wasn't as shiny as his cufflinks. And I was the only woman he'd ever seen who was as shiny as his cufflinks. Every Sunday he asked whether I needed a ride home from church. "No, thank you, Russell," I'd say. "My car's just half a block away," he'd say. Then he'd lead me by the elbow to his dust-covered Mercedes-Benz car. You have no idea how exotic a Mercedes-Benz car was in Flavia, Nebraska in 1970, long before all the streets were paved. I liked riding in that car. It would be easy to have sex in that car. One Sunday, after church, Russell drove me past my great-great-grandmother's house, all the way out of town. Finally, it was going to happen. We'd have sex in that car. I'd give my baby. One Sunday, Russell drove past my great-great-grandmother's house all the way out of town. Finally, it was going to happen. We'd have sex in that car, I'd get my baby, and I'd say, "Thank you very much, but it's not for sale." Russell drove all the way to my parents' house. There was a catered, silver-salvered lunch, complete with a handsome black and white clad, neatly mustachioed waiter, all the way from the French restaurant in Omaha. Remember, I was only 18. The waiter set up a wrought iron table in my mother's sunroom. As soon as he lit the white tapers, I melted just like wax. I fell in love with Russell. I liked feeling in love. It was almost as good as having Daddy back. It would be so easy to make love with Russell. But he said we had to get married first. It was okay. He said he'd be proud for his son to be a milazzo. And he promised me that by the time we got back from our honeymoon, Flavia Malazzo's house would be exactly like it was before my mother remodeled. So I married Russell in the most expensive wedding in the history of Flavia, Nebraska. And we moved into my parents' house. On our wedding night, Russell said, "There's something you should know. It won't really change anything. That's why I didn't tell you before. You wouldn't have understood, Indigo. You would have gotten upset." Russell told me that he had a mistress 75 miles away in Crete, Nebraska, by whom he had 3 children, aged 10, 7, and 3.5. You don't have any kids. I do have children, Indigo, and I don't plan to abandon them, not even for you. But what about her? You don't anymore. I mean, yeah, but obviously not every night. We won't have any more kids. I made her get her tubes tied the last time. So that's it. That's it. And by the way, that rat trap of a great-grandma house is gone. Raised. Flavia Malazzo has made way for Flavia, Nebraska's first apartment building. He stripped off my clothes and penetrated me like a ramrod. I thought I probably wasn't going to get pregnant that way. I was so stunned. I didn't resist or protest. Not even the second or third or fourth times. Not even though he destroyed my family monument, small and frail as my great-great-grandmother's house was. It was a monument. It was so quiet and passive. Russell went to sleep believing that I had completely accepted the situation. But I didn't accept it. I couldn't accept it. And I hurt so much, I was bleeding. I couldn't sleep. I went down the hall to sit in Violet's rocking chair. The chair that Blackie's mother had rocked him in. The chair that Blackie's father had been rocked in. The chair that Blackie's father's father had been rocked in. Yeah, that was the only thing besides the painting that I had left of my great-great-grandmother. That chair. And it was magical for me. Yeah, it was magical. I was bleeding just like that, Sal. Russell made me bleed, like that boar made that sow bleed. Even after I washed myself, the blood kept running down my legs. But she didn't scream. She didn't get hysterical like my mother. And neither did I. Because I hated Russell for tearing down my house, not for having a mistress, not even for raping me. I walked back to the master bedroom. I was so afraid Russell might wake up. But I needn't have worried. He slept like a hibernating bear. Looked like one too. No clothes on. I pulled a handful of silk ties from my father's drawer. Yeah, raped me in my father's bed. I tied Russell's feet to the foot of the bed. I tied Russell's hands to the head of the bed. I didn't want him ruining my sheets, so I piled towels under his hips. Then I pulled the belt out of the pants he hadn't even bothered to take off before he raped me. I made a noose out of his belt and slipped it around my husband's neck. My bridegroom's precious neck. Then I climbed on top of him and sat on his face. Now he woke up, squirming and grunting, and tried to shake me off. No! I screamed. Russell struggled and gasped, but he finally stopped moving. It had been so long since I'd killed anything, I wasn't sure he was dead. Then his hands twitched. I covered his face with my whole body until I was sure he was dead. I had to do something with the body. I couldn't just put it in the closet. I thought the meat locker was pretty empty. The meat for my wedding hadn't arrived before my parents' plane crash and the wedding was canceled. There was plenty of room for Russell. But what if somebody went into the meat locker and put 2 legs and 2 arms together into Russell? The only thing I could do with meat besides butcher was preserve. And so I made a Russell ham. Don't ask me how it tasted. I never ate it. And therefore, let us humble our souls before Him, and continuing in a humble spirit in His service. I ground the bones and mixed the powder into the compost heap that I kept to maintain Violet's garden. When Russell didn't appear after a few days, then weeks, and later months, I told people he deserted me. As soon as I was sure I wasn't pregnant, I filed for an annulment. And then I hired an architect to rebuild, plink by plink, splinter by splinter, Flavia Malazzo's house exactly the way it was before my husband tore it down. Russell's mistress in Crete didn't believe he'd desert her or his kids. She protested so much to the police in Crete that one of the detectives, Donald Locke, took her seriously and initiated his own extracurricular investigation. He first came to interview me on the only day it didn't rain in June in 1971. As soon as he twitched his thick black calico mustache at me, I knew he suspected me as a murderer. I hated him from that moment, not just because I knew he thought I might have killed my husband, and not just because I hated all men except my dead father. Donald asked me the same questions over and over again. Was your husband despondent? Did your husband have a setback in his business? Did you and your husband have a fight right before he disappeared? Is it possible that your husband was keeping secrets from you? That maybe he was leading a double life? No! We just got married! How could he be despondent? Do you think there's something wrong with me? Am I strange? No, I don't know anything about his business except he was about to build an apartment building. No, we agreed about everything. He was perfect and I was as shiny as his cufflinks. No, what are you trying to say? That I wasn't woman enough for him? What color was the suit that he was wearing the last time he saw you? After Russell had interviewed me with the same questions every other day for a month, I asked him why he never got enough information from me. Well, Indigo, it's up to you. I've run out of adjectives for beige. Beige? Yeah. Tan. Ecru. The color of the suit Russell was wearing the last time I saw him. Like I said, Indigo, it's up to you. A few nights later, after I'd entertained myself until I was sick of it, I heard steps and rustling noises, followed by whispered curses outside the window. I crawled to the window and peered out. That silhouette of a baseball cap. It was Donald, kneeling beside the compost heap, scooping compost into a paper bag. The bones! Oh! One morning, Donald showed up wearing a suit and tie with his Cubs cap. I want to make sure the building isn't related to your husband's disappearance. How? People bury things under foundations, Indigo. You mean like missing husbands? Did you hear what I said, Indigo? I want to make sure that house isn't related to your husband's disappearance. If I don't make out a report to the state's satisfaction, they're going to tear the house down. You're the only person I ever really talked to, Donald. You're my only friend. Was it male or female bone tissue? Indigo, the compost sample disappeared and the file was destroyed in an accident at the lab. You're never going to tell me, are you? Don't you touch my house! That's my house! You want to know where Russell is? He's in the basement. You've been having him for breakfast and lunch almost ever since you met me. Jesus. Indigo. Jesus Christ. You stupid, stupid girl. I would have let you get away with it. I mean, you have the right to remain silent.